one of the Hamas thugs went to the police station. You happened to see him.
Yeah, Ezra, I think it was a pure coincidence, but I was recording with Lincoln J outside 32 Division, and up comes a rental cube van. And very much like the one, remember about 5 years ago, the Alec Manassian rampage, that's where 32 Division is, in that section of Yonge Street where this incel ran over, I think, 13 people he killed. And so that, just seeing that van there with this guy in it gave me bad vibes, but that's besides the point. He gets out of the van. This is the guy, the chief one who was assaulting me, Ezra.
Do you know his name?
I do not, but I'm sure we can find that out.
Yeah.
And he was smiling like the Cheshire Cat, and he said words to the effect, look at that, David Menzies, once again arrested for assaulting police and for being a racist. And I said, well, first of all, the charge was not assaulting police. Secondly, please give me any example of anything I've ever said in my life that's racist. Oh, and by the way, what the hell are you doing here? Are you here to turn yourself in for violating Section 319 of the Criminal Code, chanting for calls for genocide? And he just smiled and he went in there. Ezra, I'll tell you, we waited there, I think, a good 20 minutes. I think we got the interaction we needed, so we had to leave. But what, and I've had conversations with others. What was he doing in there? Was he pointing out to the cops, this guy, and that guy on the Jewish side, these were the things they said. These were the symbolisms they did. I want you to, go after them. I think that he was giving the police their homework.
Here's my theory. Yeah. And the light bulb went on for me when you said he went to the police station on his own, all smiles, and you saw him by accident.
Yeah. I'll just leave by noting, not a word from any of the so-called freedom of speech groups on the left, not from the Canadian Association of Journalists, not from Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, not from PEN Canada, not from Amnesty International, not from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. They're all con men. They all claim to support freedom of the press, but only when it's their favorite left-wing reporters. Right. And,
Ezra, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have one of the ringleaders
Contact your lawyers again?
Yes.
For committing another unnecessary obstruction of police and attacking our people again unnecessarily.
You're wrong. I didn't attack anyone.
Yes, you did. You came in and the police told you.
No, I was trying to talk about the Jewish demonstrators on your side.
Yeah, but they didn't want to talk to you. You don't want to talk to a racist like you. You don't want to talk to someone who's racist like you.
Why are you here? Are you turning yourself in for chanting genocide?
Well, we don't chant genocide.
Oh,
you
yes,
want
you
to
do.
commit genocide.
From Milan to the sea, Intifada, go back to Europe.
Yeah, that's
By the way, folks, this is one of the ringleaders who has the ear of the cops. Look at that. That's Justin Trudeau's Canada. That's your diversity is our strength. That is the result of 9 years of vandalism to our country.
Remember the Toronto 18 when there was a terrorist cell?
Oh, yes.
And it turns out that the police had human intelligence on the inside. I forget the name of the particular turncoat, but there was a Muslim activist who for hundreds of thousands of dollars, he was paid literally hundreds of thousands of dollars by the RCMP to give names of his fellow Muslim activists to the cops. And he was an informant, is what I'm saying. And we know for a fact that CSIS has all sorts of elements and agents and human intelligence. And here's my theory. It's a hypothesis. Why is it that the same Islamic extremist activists, week after week, can clearly break the law? Not just hate speech laws, which I don't like, but which are on the books. Section 13, advocating genocide, creating a disturbance. There's a number of things that these guys do every single week, again and again. It's the same people again and again. And typically police would arrest the ringleaders. Why are they never arrested? And why is it so evident that when the cops are told by these leaders, arrest him, arrest David Menzies, they do?
Yeah.
Why are the cops so naturally defending these guys, bringing them coffee, The only way that makes sense to me is if those guys are actually paid informants by the government, and they have a sort of deal with the government where they say, you let us be anti-Semitic Nazis. You let us have our Nazi chants. You let us lightly push around and rough up the David Menzies of the world. And every now and then you arrest David Menzies or people we don't like. And in return, if there's a real terrorist that we detect, we'll throw you a bone every once in a while. Someone who was going to blow up a synagogue. If it's just smashing a window, we won't get involved. But pay us money. We'll be your insiders. I mean, the CSIS has done this before, of course. Grant Bristow, the head of the Heritage Front, was actually a CSIS agent.
Yeah.
And his job, he would argue, well, I was attracting all the white supremacists so I could keep tabs on them. Well, he actually created them. In this case, you have the actual Nazi leaders in Canada, my theory is, working for the government, and in return for keeping an eye peeled for catastrophic terrorists, the police turn a blind eye to, about 10 different species of lower level crimes. And so we have normalized those lower level crimes. We've normalized trespass. We've normalized mischief. We've normalized assault. We've normalized all the hate crimes, section 318, 319. We've normalized stalking, harassing, section 176, I believe it is, besetting a religious place. So the police, I think, have cut a deal where they allow these Hamas operatives, many of whom are paid by Iran, where they let them do their thing without being molested by the law. And my theory is he was going to the cop shop afterwards for a debrief. Nothing else makes sense. You tell me what else makes sense.
Ezra, I want to say your theory is absolutely fascinating, and I don't use the word fascinating to make it sound preposterous. Quite the contrary. It makes complete sense.
I don't know what else.
Said.
Tell me another explanation that makes sense.
Well,
why are they never arrested? Why is he happily going to the cop shop afterwards? Why are the cops doing his bidding and arresting you? Why are the cops not arresting him and his thugs? Tell me another theory that makes sense.
The only thing I can think of, well, not as this case, in specific, Ezra, but, earlier this year, Prime Minister Trudeau had a, confidential meeting with Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkiw. Why? The police chief doesn't take orders from the Prime Minister.
Or he's not supposed to, at least.
Well, exactly. And so what was said, Ezra, and here's my theory, and I have no proof. I'm going to say that right out there. So it's just a theory. I'm thinking Trudeau said, listen, in about a year, we got an election coming up. There's 5 times as many Muslims as there are Jews in Canada. And by the way, by that, I'm not saying that all Muslims go along with the rubbish we see at Bathurst and Shepherd every Sunday now. So can you go easy on the pro-Hamas folk? And by the way, if there are peaceful counter demonstrators, Salman Sima of the Persian community, he's been arrested before for the odious crime of waving a Canadian flag. If there are any members of the independent media asking impolite questions, i.e. Rebel News, throw the book at them. In my heart of hearts, I think that might have been the nature of that conversation, because why the hell is Trudeau talking or lecturing Demkiw in the first place?
Yeah, there's a lot of dark things going on here. And I started our show today by talking about what I saw in Amsterdam.
Yes.
And, I always say I go to the United Kingdom and I go to Europe because it's a dystopian time machine where I can see 5 years into our future if we don't change things. And what's happening, these gangs, I call them gangs, these pro-Hamas gangs, have normalized anti-Semitism, have normalized fear on the streets, have normalized low-level crime. It's an anti-Semitic crime wave, and it's now the new normal. The Overton window has changed. Canada used to be this wonderful, peaceful, safe place, a high-trust society, and we have allowed the worst people in the world to come here and destroy our social cohesion. Many of them are not even Canadians. They're here under false pretenses. They're falsely claiming to be refugees. They're falsely claiming to be students. They're falsely claiming to be temporary foreign workers. As we know, 700 of them are on Iran's payroll. And we have allowed these people to sow seeds of hate. And those seeds are starting to bloom. And I blame Trudeau, of course, but I also blame the Premier of Ontario and other premiers, Premier of Quebec, the mayor of many of these cities, and it's for the same reason you said before. They can do the math. And that's why I believe that the number one issue in Canada, bigger than all other issues combined, is stopping mass immigration. Because every single problem in this country is made worse by mass immigration: crime, social cohesion, hatred, inflation, housing prices high, wages low, traffic, healthcare, crowding, literally every problem in Canada is made worse by mass immigration. But of course, what's terrifying to me is these people will irrevocably change the politics of this country. You see it in France. Why is Emmanuel Macron siding with Hamas, banning the sale of weapons to Israel? By the way, they sell almost nothing to Israel. But why is he so ostentatiously putting sanctions on Israel? Because he looks out the window and Europe traded 6 million Jews for 25 million Muslims.
Unbelievable.
And he can do the math. And he might have some Jewish friends, and he might think the Jews are interesting and funny and have some achievements. And he might have a soft spot for Jews. I don't doubt that he does. But how many millions of French Muslims on there who he wants their vote, and he doesn't want them to riot? I went to Marseille, France, a year and a half ago with Ephraim Monsanto. Almost half that town is Algerian. There's no integration. There's Algerian and there's French, and they don't interconnect. And you go one block in the wrong direction, there's not a French speaker in sight.
Wow.
And they just had, and it will become, and you know, I saw this one Algerian guy. I saw him at a cafe, and he looked very modern. He looked, you know, very Western in his wear. And I asked him what he thought about France as an Algerian. And here, let me play that video for you. He basically said France colonized Algeria for 130 years,
Remember
whatever.
that, yeah.
We're here to colonize France for 100 years. Here's the exact quote, what he said. Take a look.
Tout ce qui se passe ici, c'est par rapport à l'État. Tout ça, c'est la faute des policiers, c'est la faute de l'État. Parce qu'il y a ici en France, il y a trop de racisme. Le racisme, il est au premier degré ici en France. C'est tout ce que j'ai à dire. C'est tout.
Pourquoi millions de musulmans immigrés à France si France est raciste?
Eh ben, ils nous ont colonisé 132 ans. Et là, c'est notre tour de venir ici pour comment t'expliquer là, je n'ai pas trouvé les mots. Ils nous ont colonisé 132 ans et maintenant on va les coloniser à vie jusqu'à la mort, jusqu'à la fin des temps. C'est ça.
Est-ce qu'il y a une solution? Comment allons-nous à paix, à victoire, à une solution à justice? How? Comment?
Justice. Ici en France, il n'y aura pas de justice, il n'y a pas de justice, il ne va pas y avoir de justice. Tant qu'ils sont racistes, il n'y aura pas de justice. Tant qu'il y a le racisme, il n'y aura pas de justice. Il faut avoir l'égalité entre les gens. Il faut avoir l'égalité. Il faut respecter les religions. Il faut respecter surtout les musulmans. Parce que les musulmans ne sont pas respectés ici. Ils nous voient comme des terroristes. On n'est pas des terroristes.
Voulez-vous condamner les jeunes musulmans qui révoltent à violence?
Je condamne personne. Chacun est responsable de ses actes. C'est tout. Je condamne personne. Chacun est responsable de ses actes.
Avez-vous un message pour président Macron?
J'ai pas de message pour Macron. J'ai un seul message. C'est que l'islam, c'est une religion de paix. Point barre. C'est bon.
Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. What's your name, your first name?
Mohammed, comme le prophète alayhi salatu salam.
Et votre famille a immigré à France?
Ma famille vit en Algérie.
Merci.
Vit en Algérie. Vive l'Algérie.
Dans votre cœur, êtes-vous Algérie ou Français à première?
Vive l'Algérie jusqu'à la mort. Tahia al-Jazair. Tahia al-Jazair, Tahia al-Jazair.
So that's the brazenness in France. And we are on that path here. And what's happening at Bathurst and Shepherd is of larger interest than just people who live in Bathurst and Shepherd or Toronto or Ontario. It is a template for what will happen. The rule of law will not be given to Jews or journalists. The law will be bent for political reasons or reasons of intrigue that we don't know about. Violence will be normalized. The low trust society will destroy what was great about Canada, and we will have no-go zones. We probably already have no-go zones in Canada. Anyhow, back to your arrest.
But you know what, Ezra,
yeah.
if I may, because you said a lot there, and it's incredible content. Two things. One is, I think you're off on the timeline that we're maybe 5 years away, which is to say, if a national Israeli soccer team flew from Tel Aviv to Toronto and they had a friendly with Team Canada at BMO Field here in Toronto, are you telling me that the pro-Hamas hooligans are not going down to BMO and looking for the members of the team, their supporters? I completely see that. I don't think that's 5 years away. Secondly, with mass immigration and the type of immigrants we're getting, I think what we've seen in the past year in the streets of our once great Dominion is how official multiculturalism has been a failure. And I even see people on the left saying that. It used to be you can come anywhere in the world to Canada. You can pursue the Canadian dream. You can take advantage of our social programs. You can be a Canadian citizen. All we ask in return, be good, obey the law. Don't bring age-old hatred here. But what do we see now? And it's not just with the Hamas situation in Brampton, sneaky Patrick Brown city. You're having showdowns of Sikhs versus Hindus on a continual basis now. I think the unspoken quid pro quo of come here and pursue our dream, but behave and don't import age-old feuds, I think it's been a failure, and the proof is in the pudding in the streets every weekend, Ezra.
Yeah. Charles de Gaulle, the French leader, French chauvinist, I would say, the personification of so many French things. He was asked, can a foreigner ever become a Frenchman? And he said yes, in small numbers over time, because you have to be completely soaked in Frenchness. You have to be marinated in it. You have to live it and love it. There was a candidate for president. There was Macron, of course, who was successful. There was Le Pen, who was in second place. But there was actually a Jewish Moroccan or Algerian, an Arab Jew, a Sephardi Jew named Eric Zemmour, who was is an intellectual, TV pundit, and he spoke with such passion for France. He was a competitor of Le Pen. He's on the right. He's an Arab Jew. And I think of him, there's a guy, de Gaulle would look him up and down and say, all right, you're an Arab and a Jew, but by God, you love France and you want to save France. And that's the kind of
brilliant
French immigrant. I mean, I think of Irving Berlin, the great singer, songwriter, playwright. He wrote the song White Christmas. Yeah. He wrote the song God Bless America. He was trying to out-American the Americans. He was born in Russia. Yeah. His name at birth was Israel Bayline, but he changed it to Irving Berlin. He wrote, I hate to get up, I hate to get up, I hate to get up in the morning. Like like that, he did that whole, he was the USO. De Gaulle and Canada used to believe in, yes, immigration, but you're going to integrate. Yeah. You're going to assimilate. I think of when I was a kid, I went to school in the country west of Calgary. There was 400 kids in the school. There were 2 Jews, me and my sister, 2 black kids, and 2 Chinese kids, and 2 Sikh kids. And so you had to, as a Jew, as a black, as a Sikh, as a Chinese, you had to fit in. You had to become, you couldn't say, I'm not going to learn the language. No, I mean, my family came over in 1903, so I knew the language. I don't know any other language, actually. But if you are being absorbed into the system, there's no 2 ways about it. Like Irving Berlin, you better learn English quick or you're not going to survive. Yeah. You better make friends with the indigenous people or the local people or the people who predate you pretty quick, or you're not going to have any friends. But when you bring in, Trudeau's been bringing in 2 million people a year. You bring in a country of 40 million people, you bring in 2 million people a year, you can't assimilate, integrate. You can't. You'll live in little replicas of wherever little ghettos replicating where you were back home. And that is not Canada. Trudeau thinks that may be part of Canada. I think Trudeau is motivated by votes as much as anything.
Folks, I'm so sorry to ask for your generosity again, but I have a target on my back, it would seem. And if you could go to standwithdavid.com, that's standwithdavid.com, we are incurring, legal fees, as you can imagine, because every time I practice journalism when it comes to the pro-Hamas set, who apparently have the ear of the police, I get arrested. And I need your support so I can continue practicing journalism. As I said earlier, my grandfather spent more than 5 years of his life fighting the Nazis. I will be damned if I bend the knee to the Islamo-Nazis.